Linda Bernard, also Detroit Police Commissioner Linda Bernard. It's exciting for me to be here with you today, and I have a guest that knows a lot about a subject that is near and dear to our heart, and that is police officer misconduct. But before we hear him, let me remind you that you're watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. You can watch us, listen to us, comment about us on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, all social media platforms. It's a pleasure for me to be here today with you, Mr. Crawley. Not Crawley. What am I saying?
Cromwell.
Cromwell. Why would I say that?
Yes.
Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Good morning, Commissioner Linda Bernard. I am Ainsley Cromwell, and yes, you got it right. I work at the Office of the Chief Investigator. I'm a supervising investigator there.
He's also the acting head of that office now, but he's the person that is the most experienced. And interestingly enough, you have a British name. Ainsley is British, and Cromwell is British. How did that occur?
Mom and Dad's named me after an uncle.
Oh, so you had a British uncle.
Basically.
I mean, it's very unusual for a person to have two British names, and you're the only person that I know that does. But in addition to that, I mean, you're super smart, very, very handsome, very charming, and just a go-to guy for the police commission. But let's talk a little bit about police misconduct. How long have you been the head of the chief investigator, if you will, for the office, and also acting manager of it, acting supervisor, acting everything?
I've been a supervising investigator at the Office of the Chief Investigator since 1998.
1998. I see. Were you ever in the police department?
No, I was never a police officer.
So you're one of the few people that's an investigator in the office that's supposed to investigate the police that's not a former officer.
Correct. We have civilians that work there. When we say civilians, we have people that have never been police officers. We have some former police officers.
Yes, I know that, and that's very disturbing to me. It's, you don't ask a wolf to manage the hen house. I mean, when he's been a wolf his whole life, as have many police officers who come to the Office of the Chief Investigator after they have retired as police officers, and then they're going to investigate police officers.
That occurs, and it occurs all over the country.
Oh, I'm not surprised by that, but it's still very disturbing. It is very disturbing.
I think that there are other oversight agencies that have a requirement for their staff that they cannot be a former police officer and work in their agency. So yes, that rule does occur in other agencies.
Yeah, because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, how do you investigate the organization that you're getting a pension from? I mean, the people who represent that organization. It makes no sense. I mean, it should be independent investigators always investigating police misconduct. Can you tell us something about let me say this. If I find that a police officer is abusive or harassing me or impolite, or why don't you go through the things that you can find an officer responsible for in terms of his citizen contacts or her citizen contacts?
Well, first of all, I would advise any person to remain calm.
Pull your mic up a little.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I would advise any person to remain calm.
Okay.
Cool, because if you're yelling and screaming, the officer may try to match your energy. So try to be as professional as you can under the circumstances and articulate your point. If it's a traffic stop, remain calm, listen, try to follow the instructions. If you think that something is going to go awry, you can ask from the very beginning, am I being video and audio recorded? Is your body camera on? So that there's a record of what's going on. But I think a lot of citizens try to be an attorney, right off the rip. Why did you stop me? And the officer should explain why he's stopping.
That's a good question.
Yes.
While we're on the subject,
right.
Go ahead.
And then they may try to say that I wasn't speeding. I didn't run a red light. You can debate that in court. Just remain calm, follow the instructions, even if you disagree. Remain calm. If it gets to a point where you're arguing with the officer and you think that his demeanor is inappropriate or rude or profane, you do have a right to ask for a supervisor to respond to
But you actually have a right to ask for a supervisor at any time.
at any time, but we have to know that there's only so many supervisors on the street.
That's
So
correct.
you
There's
may
only
be-
sergeants
you-
and lieutenants.
He may
Correct.
be with another citizen and you may be there for 40 minutes, 60 minutes. You may be, there's a timing factor. And then the rule is that it has to be consistent with the circumstances. So just because you were pulled over and let's just say you ran a red light and you say you want a supervisor. Okay, he may request one, but it has to be consistent with the circumstances. Some people know that they're about to be arrested because they have a gun on them, or the police officer has found a gun, and that before they get handcuffed, they say, "I want a supervisor." That doesn't stop the action.
I understand that, but first of all, there is no right to search a person for a traffic violation. The question is, why did you stop me? And if it's a driving violation, where's my ticket, officer?
Correct.
They have no right to search your car, no right to search your person, and I believe there's some dichotomy or there's two different types of opinions about whether or not a police officer can have you exit the car.
Correct. Well, officers generally can search a vehicle when it's incident to arrest.
Only if I'm being arrested.
Correct.
Because they're taking custody of the vehicle, and therefore they have a right to know what's in the vehicle.
Well, I was going to explain when it's incident to arrest, or if they're impounding your vehicle, they can conduct a search
Absolutely.
of the vehicle. So I just want to, some citizens just take what you just said. This is just a traffic stop. They can't search my vehicle. Well, if you have no insurance, that vehicle can't be on the road.
Okay.
That's a law, and they may search your vehicle if they're going to tow that vehicle.
But if they're not, well, of course, once they search it, they of course will tow it because in order to cover their own, posterior. But that's a fact. But they cannot just when you have your paperwork and everything in order, which is very hard for people in our community because
Yes.
insurance is so high.
Yes.
Many people do not have insurance. They can write you a ticket for no insurance, or as you said earlier, they can take you and the vehicle into custody.
And that's why it's important for people to remain calm. Because if you know you don't have any insurance, don't start acting a fool.
Correct.
Okay, your car's about to be. Let him write you the ticket for the no insurance.
But may I interrupt on that?
Yes.
Because they know when you have insurance. They scan the license plate. They know when a car, because of license plate ID, license plate readers, LPR. They know that the car is insured, but they will give you a ticket for no insurance anyway, which I think is something that your office, and you're the office that receives all complaints about police conduct, should sustain the offense because it's dishonest. You may not have it on you, but if I know that you have it, then it's dishonest for you to say that I don't have insurance just because I don't have a skinny piece of paper.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, I think that's on a case-by-case basis. And that's something that Detroiters have been dealing with for a long time. Very high car insurance.
Well, yeah, right. And most people can't afford it. And that's a fact. And there's, there are all sorts of promises about what the city's going to do about that from every office, council, mayor, the legislature, but it never really happens. They have this new insurance now called CORE, as I understand it, that's supposed to be much more reasonable. Is that true?
I'm not familiar with CORE, but insurance rates have dropped maybe $100, $200.
That's not enough.
It hasn't been cut in half like we would all like.
No, it's not just we have the highest, I think, insurance rate in the nation.
Correct.
This is outrageous in a city that's 88% black. Who does this? And poor, as we know. I mean, we're not it's not Bangladesh, but it's still a very, very poor city.
And it's funny how it's just restricted to Detroit. Once you go
on the other side of 8 Mile, right? Go across the street.
Across the street, Grosse Pointe.
Correct.
It's dramatically dropped, and those
by thousands of dollars.
Thousands of dollars. and they drive into the city, park their cars in Detroit for 8, 9, 10 hours, and drive out. They may even stay longer once they get off work. And a lot of Detroiters do the opposite. They live in Detroit, but they drive out into the suburbs.
Correct.
So
Yeah, that's true.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, but no, but okay. Back to what does the Office of the Chief Investigator do? First of all, I would like to remind our audience that the office is authorized in the Detroit Charter. The City of Detroit Charter is the constitution for the City of Detroit.
Yes.
So yeah, so this is it's in the charter that you have a right to complain about police misconduct. And if I may diverge for just 1 minute, the reason it was written that way, Coleman Alexander Young, our first black mayor, put it in there because he just liked the police, but he knew about the police atrocities in the black community, and it was always a problem. I mean, everybody, of course, knew about it, from Martin Luther King to Malcolm X. Everyone has talked about the police power being misused against black citizens. So,
and that was in the 70s.
That was even before, historically. But I mean, the police department started as a result of like a posse that would form to capture slaves. And then they went to New York, and they started this new thing where they became the enforcement body. But the whole police department concept didn't exist in England and everywhere else. It came to America as a result of slave catchers. The slave catchers were the police, to force you back into servitude, into slavery. So that's where police came from. So Coleman Alexander Young, was a man's man. He was nobody's pushover. So he wrote the charter, and he put in the charter that there would be a person like yourself, the Office of the Chief Investigator, to in fact investigate police misconduct.
Okay, but before we get to the complaints, I want to just back up just a little bit.
Okay.
Because when people want to complain about the police, I want to let them know about our Board of Police Commissioners, and we have a very unique position in Detroit that if you have a complaint about the police, yes, you can come to my office, our office, the Office of the Chief Investigator. We will investigate your complaint. But before that,
and you will either sustain it or not sustain it.
And we'll get to that. But before that, we are very unique in Detroit that every single week, the police commissioners who oversee the police department and the police chief are present at a Board of Police Commissioners meeting each week. And the citizens have a right and obligation, if you will, if they have a problem, to face that board and tell the board about their complaint. Initially, for about 2 minutes, you get a public comments, and then the board usually refers that complaint for investigation to our office, the Office of the Chief Investigator. We investigate the administrative complaints, meaning if there's a criminal complaint, an officer stole something, that gets investigated by internal affairs.
Yeah, the complaint is made to your office, and then it's referred by you to internal affairs for the police department.
Correct. But
if it's a criminal act that a police officer did.
And the citizen doesn't necessarily have to come to our office. They can file a complaint online. They can write a letter. They can send an email. They can go to the Board of Police Commissioners meeting. They can go to any precinct, and we will receive that complaint. They can make a complaint about anything that they want.
Feel offended by.
That's correct.
As a result of dealing with the police department. What is that telephone number?
That telephone number is area code 313-596-2499.
Can you say that again?
Area code 313-596-2499.
Now, they can also file complaints via the internet?
Yes.
Okay, so how do they do that?
If they get on the internet and they go to www.detroitmi.gov and look under Police Commission or the Office of the Chief Investigator, and then there'll be a link where they can fill out an online form. So just go to the main website for the City of Detroit, type in Police Commission, and then you'll see our office, the Office of the Chief Investigator, and the link for the online complaint form will be present.
How many investigators do you have?
Currently, we have 14 investigators.
But you've got, 6 coming on Monday?
We have 5 investigators coming this May 1st, 2000.
So it'll actually be, your office will increase by 20 people. That's because does the new directors coming on and all that? Or is that a...
We'll be up to 19 investigators, and then the new chief investigator will make 20.
Okay. So that's a big investigative staff.
For what we have to handle, it's going to be close.
Why do you say that?
Because we receive over 1,000 complaints a year, and we have to thoroughly investigate each complaint. We have complaints ranging from an officer said the word baloney, all the way up to this homicide investigation wasn't conducted properly.
Okay.
So it's a very wide range. I mean, when someone says an officer used the word baloney, that may be offensive to some, that may be nonsensical to others, but it's on a piece of paper, and an investigator has to look into the matter, and it has to be documented. And sometimes, depending on what the case is, we have to call the officer in. If it's on video, we may be able to resolve it very quickly. If it's not on video, we may have to call the officer in. And there are a lot of things that we do behind the scenes. It's just not so easy. So that's why we need so many investigators.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, as you're watching us today, I want you to know that you're looking at Mr. Ainsley Cromwell, very, very British, and he is the chief investigator for the office of the chief investigator.
Supervising investigator.
That same thing. He does all the work. He's the go-to man whenever you have a problem. Remember that name, Ainsley Cromwell. If you're having any issues, ask for him, and then of course he can make sure that somebody is doing the right thing. You're watching us on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the entire world. Coming to you live right here out of the great city of Detroit. You can watch us, listen to us, comment, everything on any and all social media platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, every single social media platform. So, again, okay, Ainsley, we're talking about police misconduct. What is the most egregious complaint you've ever received? And you've been with the department, you said 18 years, I'm sorry?
Since 1997.
How long was that? 97, 2007?
Yeah, we're counting.
Yeah.
We're counting.
Yeah, okay.
We're getting up there. But I've been a supervisor since 1998. That's a very interesting question because you know what? Every day there's something more egregious. My heart goes out when I see young children or older adults get into it with officers. So I would have to say some demeanor complaints. There's no reason to speak to someone in a derogatory or profane manner. I know that some officers may think that the occasion may arise to do that, to get on their level, but it's just about some self-control.
Well, the good part about that now, ladies and gentlemen, and please listen carefully, every Detroit police officer, this is not true throughout the state of Michigan, every single Detroit police officer is supposed to have his or her body cam operating when they even approach a citizen. It is when they're approaching them for a law enforcement manner. The body cam is supposed to be on, and that's what the policy says.
The current policy says when they have significant contact.
That is called significant contact, when you're stopping me to talk, and you're a police officer, because of the imbalance of power between a police officer who has the right to use deadly force and me, who has no rights whatsoever.
If they're stopping you for an investigatory manner, you're absolutely right.
When you see those red lights, that's the investigatory matter.
Correct, but if they're just approaching you on the street, sometimes they're casual encounters where you're just saying, hey, how's your day, Commissioner Bernard?
They might say that to me. They're not going to say that to ordinary, to young black guys.
And that's why I said it's important that if there is a traffic stop, remind the officer, excuse me, am I being videotaped? Is your body camera
If there's
on?
any stop, if there's any contact with a police officer and that you did not initiate,
correct,
then you should ask them if their body cam is on.
Yeah, because you want to reinforce the policy. I mean,
correct.
So what if they forgot to turn it on?
Right.
And so you're reminding them, is your body-worn camera operating properly? Is it on?
But I also want people to know that when you don't want it on, you can ask the officer to turn it off. For example, if you are assaulted, let's say by your husband or boyfriend, and you don't want that to be, as you're talking to the officer, you don't want that to be recorded. You don't have to have it recorded. You don't have to be all busted up or whatever, and on camera. I mean, some of us have vanity, and we don't want to be seen at our worst time.
Correct. Or
we don't want pictures of us at that point.
Or you're going to be giving sensitive medical information.
Correct.
The
Correct.
ambulance is coming, and they want to know, do you have any illnesses, and you might not want that disclosed on video.
Correct. Absolutely. So you always have the right to request the officer to turn off the video when they come to your house. It's not just traffic stop. When they come to your house, officer, can you turn off your video? And you have a right to talk to the officer about whatever your complaint is. You may not want them to see your house because it's junky. So tell them turn off the video. That's what I would do.
But certainly, if you think it's going to be a confrontation or a problem, or you want the evidence for a court, or you want to document your own actions or the officer's actions, be mindful that the video recording should be rolling. But there's only one way to confirm that, and that's if you ask.
That's correct. Like if your face is messed up or something and you want to go to court about it, or you want to sue him or get a divorce or something like that, that video evidence could be, and thank you for reminding me of that. That could be very, very provocative.
But we want to say also that video doesn't tell you everything. Sometimes it doesn't tell you why the officer is doing what he does. And that's one of the reasons that our investigators have to bring officers in. It will show you what happened, but you don't know why he did it.
Right. Okay.
So you have to ask questions.
And when you bring an officer in, he has rights under something called garrity.
Correct.
Can you explain that to our audience?
Garrity is a legal term that occurred in...
Garrity is a Supreme Court case.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's a legal term where officers are sworn to tell us the truth for an administrative investigation as opposed to something that's going to be criminal. And their statement in the administrative investigation cannot be used in the criminal investigation if the investigation goes to a criminal matter.
And it cannot be used for disciplinary purposes, as I understand it.
It can be because it can be used in disciplinary purposes for
I'm
our
incorrect.
investigations because we guarantee all our officers, and our officers are sustained in some of our allegations, and the Detroit Police Department's disciplinary administrative section will then discipline the officer based on our investigation, and the officer has been given guarantee rights.
Okay, so then it can be used in either context. It can affect their promotions. It can affect
Yes.
they can be disciplined as a result, lose time, lose money, lose rank as a result of one of your investigations, and so it is important. But the officer is then sworn to tell the truth in a guarantee hearing.
That
investigation.
is correct. Not telling the truth is a very serious offense for the Detroit police officers. And
Why? What happens to them if they lie?
well, if they lie, it could lead up to termination.
Okay. So if you later discover that I lied in the Garrity interview with you, that I really did what the person said I did, then I can be disciplined
Yeah.
pursuant to the union contract.
Pursuant to the union contract. And we focus on the citizen's complaint, and that whole lying piece, that goes on to disciplinary administration, and that's under the chief of police, whether or not, I think it's Bradley Giglio.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a particular list that you can get on, and you might not be able to perform certain functions as a police officer
But
if you're called on.
I didn't think lying to you would be Bradley Giglio is a list of officers that for our audience that have been created by our department, by the police department, and by the prosecutor's office, of officers who lie under oath. Because when you're in a Garrity, you are under oath.
Yes.
Yes.
They sign rights.
Right. Yeah. So when you lie, if you will, to Ainsley, then your name can wind up on the Bradley Giglio list, which is, and I have it. It's like 4 pages of officers who have lied either in court or under oath. And so that makes them an unreliable witness for purposes of another proceeding. Let's say they stop you out here, or me, and we say they did so and so. What our word will likely carry because they're on the Bradley Giglio list of liars, and so so the prosecutor won't even put that officer on the stand because that officer is on the Bradley Giglio list. Although in the past they did, as you know, they didn't care whether they were liars or not. But now we have a really good prosecutor and a really good process by which these matters are handled.
And that's another good reason for citizens to make sure that that body-worn camera is on and working properly.
Well, not just that. I urge them. I don't know how. You have to show me when we leave here how to record on my cell phone. I don't know how to do that. But you also can use your own. As you see people throughout the country, they have all this their own personal cell phone footage of what happened with the officer after it stopped. So as the officer is parking behind you or pulling up behind you, then you have the right to implement or start your own cell phone.
You do, but you have to be careful because if the officer sees you reaching for something, the circumstances, you want to announce yourself and what you're doing, and if it's okay. And sometimes the officers say that's fine. You can record. I'm recording too. But if you start reaching around and he's telling you not to, please follow the instructions. We don't want anybody hurt if he thinks you're reaching for a gun. He doesn't know what you're reaching for.
I understand that, but they're quick to think it's a gun for some strange reason.
You're right, and they've been thinking that for decades. So
I think it just reinforces their power and control.
That does, but we want everybody to be safe. And like you said, if you're going to record, go ahead and reach before the officer even gets to your car. Get your camera out before the officer gets to the car. Don't wait until you get into a confrontation and then start reaching.
Because that case in Minnesota where the guy was pulled over, his girlfriend was in the car, and they shot and killed him. He had no weapon at all, and she was recording it. I don't, other states and everything have different rules, other cities regarding body cams. I don't know if the other cities on the other side of 8 Mile have that rule regarding a body cam, that the body cam has to be on for citizen contacts. Do you know? Have you talked to your colleagues around the state of Michigan? Highland Park, Oak Park, Ferndale, Bloomfield Hills, all of them.
All of the places you just mentioned.
Wyandotte.
All of the places you just mentioned don't have civilian oversight. And that's another good reason. When people talk about the negative things about Detroit, we have civilian oversight. We have an office. We have
since Coleman Alexander Young created it in 1974. He created the Detroit Police Commission. He said, I won't use his words, those motherfuckers over there, they need somebody over them that's not a police officer. So he appointed 5 civilians, one of whom a lawyer, a college professor. I mean, people, very, very bright, very intelligent people who were able to decipher through all the crap that the police, because Nichols was the police chief in Detroit. He ran against Coleman Young, a big white guy who was known for being abusive of people's civil rights. I mean, in large part. And so that's when Coleman Young created. Well, I think we were the first civilian oversight board in the country over a municipal police department.
Yeah, because if you go to Bloomfield or those places that you mentioned, it's going to get handled by a police officer.
Yeah.
It might be even handled by that person's sergeant.
That's correct.
And they may just ask that officer, hey, what happened?
That's a very good point.
They may just take his word for it. I don't know how thorough those investigations are because they don't.
But what's so interesting about it, as important as this concept is to the community and to fairness and justice within our country, the Michigan State Police doesn't have an oversight board.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
MSP, they're rolling all the time like the big dogs on the highway and everything.
Lansing has an oversight police commission. So does Ann Arbor.
Ann Arbor definitely, because they're fair.
But their board is just recent, within the last 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting, and maybe we can follow up on that. How many cities or townships in the state of Michigan actually have a police oversight board?
Grand Rapids,
or really, what does oversight look like in these communities where it's just go to the sergeant, right? Go to his boss.
Well, it's growing. I mean, I did look at something that said Royal Oak had a civilian oversight agency, but I don't know how active they are. I haven't heard anything, and I've done some research.
They've never contacted you to find out how to do it the right way? Since we're the biggest in the state, right?
That's correct.
By far.
By
the
far.
largest office.
Yes.
And we have all these policies and procedures that somebody could just come and Xerox if they asked you for them, so they could start their own. I mean,
that's correct.
Yeah, there's no reason.
Those
You don't
other
have to reinvent the wheel. That's my point.
Correct.
I mean, and I want to talk about that in just 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you once again, you are watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. I'm attorney Linda Bernard. This is Chop It Up with attorney Linda Bernard, and my guest today is Mr. Ainsley Cromwell, a very British fellow. And you can watch us, listen to us, keep up with us all the time on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, any and all social media platforms. So Ainsley, I want to come back to this real quickly. We were talking about other cities that may or may not have an oversight board, but this is true throughout the country. And the interesting thing about you is that you have, if you will, a national perspective, because you served very successfully, I might add, on the board for the whole United States of America for national for oversight agencies. Can you tell us something about that agency and about what you did?
It's called NACO, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement.
Say that again.
NACO.
And the whole, spell it, I mean, tell us
The
what it is.
National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement.
Okay. And what does that association do?
That it's really a professional organization that brings all the oversight agencies in the country together for a conference, and they conduct training once a year. They also have trainings, webinars throughout the year. But there's one big conference where they'll have presentations, different workshops on the administration of police oversight. And now they're getting into jails, and it's growing. And as you know,
Oversight of what's happening with respect to the people who control jails?
Correct. And the people that control police departments.
Okay.
So a lot of different boards and commissions, investigators, attorneys, and now we're getting a lot more grassroots organizations that will come and want to know how different cities are policing their police.
I see. And how long have you been affiliated with that organization? This is a national organization.
Correct.
And what I like about it is that you had people from the Department of Justice as speakers, and and certainly from the U.S. Attorney's Office, as well as you can have people from the FBI. You have speakers from every single walk of life,
including former prisoners, people who have been to jail. I mean, it's very diverse. It's very educational. Some of the courses are top college level courses that you would hear in an hour and a half, and you're given statistics and theories, and then other ones are more down to earth, grassroots, and you're hearing from individuals who want to make police oversight better.
If people want to know more about the national organization or about what you do, and because you act as a consultant for any organization, and of course the Board of Police Commissioners would allow you to do that. You could go to other cities or whatever if as a consultant on these issues. How do they reach you?
You can reach me at the Office of the Chief Investigator at 596-2499. That's
Area code 313?
Area code 313. For NACO, it's www.naco.org, and that will put you in touch with oversight agencies across the country.
Now, people do not have to file a complaint. They can come in and talk to you personally. They don't have to do it on the phone or online or anything like that. Where are you located?
We took a walk-in that you referred yesterday.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Oh, he was furious. We
won't get into that specific case, but
but I can just tell you, I was on the phone. It was 2:00 in the morning, and he was screaming at the officer. I mean, I was listening. We were talking about demeanor. I mean, at the top of his voice, and cursing and carrying on, because he's just so frustrated by what's happening. I thought he told me he'd be there at your office at 7:00 in the morning. I said, don't go that early.
He did arrive. But see, that's another thing that just as individuals, if I'm screaming at you,
I was proud of the officer. He took it. He screamed for at least 8 minutes. I was listening to him,
Right.
and the officer never raised his voice.
And that's what I'm saying.
He was well trained, because ordinarily he just would have escalated.
And that's what I was going to
And
say.
he's standing there he said in his underwear, his boxer shorts, and his t-shirt. He was in his bed when the police came in and stuff, and so he was really furious about this, And he just never stopped screaming. He even called Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 7. I'm sure there's going to be a story about it. Ultimately, he's going to be interviewed about it. So they'll probably come and interview you as well. So that's a heads up.
Yeah, but when people are screaming, you know what
it makes them hostile. You don't scream at a person with a gun. Who does this?
Yeah.
I tried to. I couldn't get him under control. I kept saying, "Please." I said, "Officer." I was talking to the officer and everything, and I couldn't get the whole situation under control. At least for
because
him.
of the screaming.
Yeah,
And that's why we're trying to tell people try to remain calm, because then you can get your point across, and you may be able to have things discussed in a rational manner.
Right.
Things can go back and forth, because if you start screaming at an officer, he may try to match that screaming, and then things escalate.
Yeah, and it escalates from there on, But I never forget that an officer has a gun, and to me, that's the difference between life and death. And I have to play. I don't scream at officers personally, but ever. I don't think I could get mad enough to do. When you hear this video, when you get that officer's video, that's the sergeant that had come. Wait, there's like 3 officers and a sergeant. And he laid the sergeant low. And I could tell that the sergeant was a big man just from his voice. He had this deep timbre. So just the kind of thing that a big guy has, the voice of a big man. And how you scream at a man that's a big man with a gun. I mean, he could have knocked him across this room with just one
I
blow.
understand. And I get it. You're at your home, and I'm not telling you can't do what you want to at your home, and sometimes there's a way. Well, sometimes you have to scream.
Yeah,
Let's
because
not
it's just so emotional for you, and
Correct.
and so and the worst part is when he said. He said, this was a terrible statement. He said, and this was something that any man might say. He said, "Have you looked at my sister? Do you think I would do that?" So I guess he was suggesting that his sister was unattractive and not susceptible to the things that they were talking about. But I mean, he said, I mean, it's all on tape. It's terrible. I mean, it is unbelievable.
But you said the officers were professional, or they weren't?
They were totally professional. I have to give it to them. I heard the whole thing. For 2 hours they were there before they took her with them, and there's no question. They were super professional. And he told them I was on the phone, and that he was calling channel. He called everybody. I mean, he called because he has media relationships.
And
So you should know that. But get all of the video.
And that's another thing. Sometimes
I knew you were going to get it anyway without me even telling you.
Sometimes just because officers are professional, you don't know if they violated policy or not. So if you feel that there's a problem, still you can file a complaint and we'll look into it.
Well, he told you his complaint is with 911, the officers, everything. I mean, he went over to the 11th precinct. He was not playing. Woo-hoo. I mean, I could not get him off his square. I could not get him off that square. Although I subsequently talked to him till 4:00 in the morning about he was trying to go to D.C. to help his cousin, who's very close to. And I was saying, well, you should rent a car. You should do this. I was at my computer anyway, so I was like, this is the car rate. You can drive. You can rent a car for $300. You're taking your son, so you need to do it like this. Don't go on the airplane because it's going to be like $600 to $800, or at least. So we were. He was calm by 4:00 in the morning. We've done a lot of work together in the community. So, he's a good person and a good father, excellent father. He just got the award from the governor that that big thing they had at the DSO, not at the DSO, at the Opera House, where the governor gave these great citizen achievement awards. He's one of just 2 or 3 people I know that you saw it was on TV and all that stuff, and he got that award. I mean, he's an outstanding citizen, and he's, as he probably told you, an ex-offender, a returning citizen. So he's just done remarkable things with his life since he returned from being incarcerated. But I mean, he was. Oh. But I'm glad that you took the complaint. Thank you very much.
Well,
and
he had already filed a complaint.
Yeah, well, he's well, young, but he wanted to talk to you in person. So I said, go over there.
He did.
I said, I don't know your address, but I said it's right in Palmer Park. Oh, incidentally, tell people where the office of the chief investigator is.
You just said it. It's in Palmer Park. It's at right off of 6 Mile and Woodward. That's 900 Merrill Plaisance is the address, and the area code. The zip code is 48203.
Right. So yeah, so that's where you can find all the investigators that you've been talking about. If you want to come in and file a complaint yourself,
Yes.
which I think is really preferable, quite frankly, especially when you're as upset as he was. I mean, he needs to talk to a person, a real person, not just a machine or try to type out something. Although I think he's written up his complaint as well because he's a phenomenal typist, like about 80 words a minute.
Wow.
Did he do that? Yeah, he typed, and he knows technology very well. So I'm sure, I can assure you, that the complaint has been made to the chief's office, to the mayor who has called him and asked him to do certain things for him. I mean, public things like come to city council meeting, come for this, do this, things like that. He has deep relationships and contacts.
Well, I would like to tell you a little bit about what happens after a person files a complaint.
That's great. Why don't you do that?
And
but before you do that, let me remind our audience again that you're watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the entire world. It's located right here in the city of Detroit, the Motor City. And you can watch us, listen to us anytime on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, all of the social media platforms. My guest is a very distinguished man who's very, very British. I keep teasing him about it because he's one of the few black men that I know that has a British first name and a British last name. Ainsley Cromwell, like it was a General Cromwell, and he was part of Queen Elizabeth's court. And Cromwell is just a huge name and has tremendous recognition in England, in London, throughout the country. So anyway, Mr. Cromwell, go ahead. You want to tell us?
When a citizen files a complaint in the city of Detroit, it will be documented on what we call a CCR, which is a citizen complaint report. And it will be a summary of your complaint, because obviously everything can't fit on one piece of paper, but we'll get the who, what, when, where, and why on that complaint. But not to worry if everything is not on that complaint, because what our investigators do is that we will contact you within 3 days of you making that complaint, and we'll try to get a recorded statement from you over the telephone, or if you want to come in person, we'll record you, and we will get all the details. So we'll get which officer said what. We'll get, was it a black officer, was it a white officer, was it a female officer, where did he hit you, were you hurt, were you injured, those type of things. Did you have a camera? Were there any witnesses in your car? What are their names? What are their addresses? We'll go through all of that. So we'll get all of that information from you relatively early on after you file the complaint. Then after that, you'll receive a letter maybe around the 45th day. But during that time, we are gathering the body-worn camera evidence. We are interviewing the officers. We are researching the Detroit Police Department's policies to see if the officer acted properly or improperly. And then the investigator is going to type up in certain sections, and after they gather additional information, they may even go to the scene, and we call that a canvas. And they'll look for additional video. Okay. They'll conduct additional interviews.
If it's out on the street or something like that.
Correct. Yeah. If it happened at a gas station, maybe that gas station has video. Or maybe the clerk at the gas station saw something and said, yeah, I saw the officer push him. If the officer didn't have his body camera on. Mm-hmm. So we'll do those investigative things. Mm-hmm. And then we'll come to a conclusion based on the evidence, based on the facts, based on the video, based on the witness statements. We'll come to a conclusion on whether or not that officer acted within policy.
And when you do that, you come up with this. Of course, you write it all up, and you, in some instances, say that the complaint is sustained against the officer, or it's not sustained.
Correct.
Meaning
A sustained complaint, meaning that your allegation, the officer's actions did not comply with department policy. So your complaint is sustained. If the officer's actions complied with department policies, it would be exonerated.
As you say that, you're right. You go back to the policies that are all approved by the Office of the Chief and approved by the Police Commission itself.
Correct.
It would be helpful if you served on the Police Commission Policy Committee so that you could help us put together policies that might even better. It's just one meeting a month. Better protect citizens, because you are listening to the real deal from real people who had real life experiences. Mm-hmm. So I think that us doing it in a bubble doesn't make any sense.
And as you know, this past week, 2 days ago, the police commission just invited the public to contribute on policy.
Well, I've been saying that for years, but I wanted it published, and not only that, and I want the law school involved, because there are constitutional issues with respect to police, and I really want the once over, if you will, from professors who have no police anything, but only looking at the law as it relates to protecting our constitutional rights.
And we want the best policies. Like you said, we want constitutional policing.
That's what that's what we're supposed to be doing. That was a term that was initiated by President Obama, as I recall. But you've been trying to do it, obviously, for some time. But it's interesting that you I forgot about the fact that there are witnesses in your report. So I'm actually a witness on that complaint that you were just talking about. I was on the phone the whole time. He called immediately. It was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh. And I kept saying, calm down. It almost reached the point of verbal abuse.
That's another thing. When citizens get in contact, when citizens get in contact with the police, they go from speechless, where they can't get a word out, to constantly talking, where they just overtalk. It's a very emotional experience.
Yes, it is.
When you're stopped or have to have interaction with the police.
That's true.
Why I started this off with, if you can remain calm so you can get your words out clearly, you can describe what's happening, you can say how you're offended, and then maybe the situation can change right at that very moment.
But see, I think you do that naturally. How did you get to that place in your life and so forth where you were calm and reasonable and, not emotional about things? You're just that way. Isn't that your personality?
Sometimes it happens to us all. Sometimes we get caught up. So you just don't know what's going on. You get caught up. You're in a store. You're in a rush. You want to hurry up. Just gotta take a second, take a breath, and just kind of calm down. And being inconvenienced for 10 minutes is not a big deal.
You know what? I want you to remind me this week. One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to have our videographer videotape you. I think your demeanor. I'm serious. I think that and we could run it as a PSA, how to operate when you're stopped by the police. Yeah. Reading it isn't the same thing as seeing you. Hearing your voice, watching how you're talking, and everything is what makes the difference. And I think we need to videotape that and probably put it in every school and make it part of every presentation that we're making, so people will understand. It's nothing to do with the fact that you're an adult, a mature person.
Right.
But it has just to do with the way you're handling it.
You have to handle the situation in a rational manner. Because if you're irrational, the officer's going to react to your actions, and it has to. You can get an attorney later. You can get Linda Bernard, and she will go after that officer with all her might. But in the heat of the moment, you can't get out of your square, because I think that's how things escalate.
That is true, and you can sometimes lose your point. Now I can be guilty of that, and you've seen that before. I actually, ladies and gentlemen, I need to practice what he's preaching because I will raise my voice and escalate things fairly quickly because especially when it's a matter of human rights and dignity or respect.
And you're passionate about it. There's no problem being passionate about what you're passionate about.
No, but it's better to be like you are.
Well, in that
measured and thorough and thinking and not interrupting, which is something I do all the time. I got to work on that.
I have to work on interrupting too. But as you know, traffic stops have been a big issue in our country for decades.
Correct.
But they've come to the national spotlight because of video. And now we're seeing it week after week, month after month, and year after year of all these police misconduct situations. And you're right, that case in Minnesota, the young man and the female, they were quite calm.
Right.
From what I remember.
And the officer pulled his gun and blew his head off. Who does this? I mean, I'm like...
Well, I think there are some people that are not suited to be police officers. Some of them are scared, and I think that we've seen that in some national events.
That's true.
But some of them are very safe, and that's the first person I want. If there's an emergency, I want to call the police and have them get here immediately. But they're human. Everybody's human.
You know, that lady officer who shot that young brother in the car, that was, I think, in Minnesota too. She just got out of jail. Remember that she was convicted, and I saw it on the news.
She got out early. I think she
was going to get out early
months.
Anyway, huh?
I think she served 16 months of a sentence.
Yeah, or something like that. But she's out now. You know, so that's always the case, I think. You know, I want to talk for just a few minutes because we only have a little while left about what you understand about the code of blue. I always tell people, and I told him this that night. I said, let me tell you something. The 11th commandment is thou shalt not, if you're a police officer, talk about another police officer. That the code of blue is on lock. They are totally on lock. They will take up for each other, lie for each other, do whatever they got to do in order to make sure that their fellow officer or sister officer does not have issues. You saw that in that case with that lady, where all the officers and the sergeant and everything, where she shot that guy in the car. Was that Minnesota? I'm trying to think again. But anyway, you remember he was a nice looking guy, and she pulled him. She just pulled her gun. She said she thought she was pulling her taser. There was not even a reason to tase him under any of our policies. There was no reason to tase him. He hadn't done anything that was aggressive in any sense of the word. But you know, the officers that were there, that were with her and everything, and the sergeant, what she was doing was proper. And you can mistake a taser, which is a lot lighter than a gun and bright yellow. You can mistake the gun for the taser. I mean, the taser for the gun. I mean, who does this? I mean, they made all the excuses in the world because of the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not condemn another police officer or a police officer's actions.
It's a very unique term because it's an organization, and then these are co-workers. And these co-workers are, quote unquote, fighting the bad guys, running to emergencies, saving people. And they're co-workers. And they're all doing this day in and day out. And so, like you said, they stick together in certain opportunities. But, however, I do think that terminology and that definition is weakening a little bit because of body-worn cameras. You can only go so far nowadays.
And lying. But if there is no body-worn camera, then you can still lie.
Correct. But, I mean, the whole term of that blue line 20 years ago is different now because of body-worn cameras. You got officers that know that they're going to lose their job if they lie, and they know that certain things are on camera.
Correct.
So there's still a brotherhood there with these co-workers that work.
But see, that to me, that's why it's so important that when you get a complaint and the officer does not have on his body-worn camera or have it operational like he's supposed to, that the complaint is affirmed in favor of the citizen. Okay. So, again, give us that telephone number and that address
313-596.
And this is how citizens file complaints
Citizen
against
complaints.
Detroit police officers.
313-596-2499.
Say it again, please.
313-596-2499.
Thank you, Mr. Cromwell, chief investigator now for nearly 20 years for the
Supervising investigator.
Same thing.
Yeah.
You're the man in charge. Others come and go. Ainsley's there. You can always count on Mr. Cromwell. So ask for him if you feel that your investigator is not being appropriate or not asking the right questions. Thank you so much, Ainsley, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you.